So today we are talking to Silent Sentinel, Pelco's long range. Not sure why I always do that when I go long range, but we're talking about the long range PTZ platforms for the more extreme environments and when to choose Jaeger or to choose Aeron. Today I have Rob Yaki, who leads the product management for the Silent Sentinel line. And then I also have Ed Stiles, who leads business development. Rob, Ed, welcome to the Pelco Brief.
Thank you so much for having us, Sander.
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for being on. Every conversation needs a little bit of color. So for context, where does Silent Sentinel sit inside Pelco and Motorola Solutions today?
Absolutely. When we were designing the Silent Sentinel line, our main goal was to solve the critical problem of long-range video surveillance. This isn't your typical security camera. We're talking about being able to see crystal clear detail from genuinely impressive distances. This is where Silent Sentinel really sets itself apart. You know, good quality camera might be able to detect things a couple of kilometers away. That's our standard line. But when you move up to the Silent Sentinel platform, specifically the Aeron, you're not just adding a little bit of distance, you're multiplying by over 7 times, taking you out to 15 kilometers. And then there's Jaeger, the absolute peak, giving you visibility for the length of a small marathon, 30 kilometers from a single vantage point.
So the Jaeger, that's the big one where I don't want to say cameras because it can have what 4 different types of sensors within that, correct?
It can actually have even more than that. So we can have up to 4 payloads and also put a radar unit on top of it.
Sheesh. Okay. So I believe at one time, Silent Sentinel had up to 4 camera lines. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but they had 4 different camera offerings. Is that correct?
That is correct. The entry-level line was called Oculus, and Oculus kind of overlapped with our Esprit line, so we obsoleted it right after the acquisition.
Okay.
So if you're looking for that kind of a camera, we already had one in the portfolio. The other thing they had was a line called Osiris. And Osiris was the predecessor of the Jaeger system. So the current Jaeger system covers all of the kind of use cases and where they were selling that other camera as well. So it was a little bit redundant in terms of the portfolio. So we've really kind of boiled it down to these 2 key lines.
Got it. So we streamlined it down to these 2 being the Jaeger and the Aeron. So for listeners, so that they can track along, can you give a elevator split or elevator pitch as far as which one to choose and when? What's the simplest way of how to choosing it?
Yeah, certainly. The simplest way to choose between Aeron and Jaeger comes down to the question for the end user: what is the absolute maximum distance you need to cover? If your coverage area is less than 15 kilometers, the Aeron is a powerful high-performance choice for you. But if you have a massive perimeter, think 20, 25, 30 kilometers, you simply have to step up to a Jaeger. You know, it's really the difference between seeing a very long way and seeing a very extreme distance.
Okay, so just along those lines, as far as how far we are seeing, in the long range work, seeing further isn't always enough. So what performance actually matters? Is it DRI distances? Is it stabilization? Could it be absolute positioning, or is it all of the above?
Well, I think when you're talking about these really long range missions, it comes down to 2 things are absolutely non-negotiable, right? The first is the glass. You need to have an incredible lens that can actually pull in and resolve detail from massive distances. Think about those oversized telephoto lenses you see on the sidelines of like a major sporting event.
Okay.
The ones with the really huge front element. Well, our lenses are even bigger than that. They aren't just off-the-shelf parts. Each one is actually like an engineering marvel. We're talking about components that cost tens of thousands of dollars by itself. Why? Because you need to capture every single photon of light and focus it with surgical accuracy over these massive focal lengths. The second thing is stability. You know, we're really talking about that positioning platform that can hold that camera, that lens, on the exact target without vibrating, without drifting, in even harsh weather conditions. For example, imagine looking through a soda straw. You probably did that as a kid, and you
Yeah.
see this really, really itty bitty tiny area. For Silent Sentinel, there's an even narrower field of view, maybe just a fraction of a degree, right? So
Okay.
if you're even off by the tiniest bit, you completely miss your target. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. If there's any vibration, say a gust of wind, even heat expanding the metal, that video will be totally unusable. So we really need that pinpoint surgical accuracy to keep the camera locked on target, or the whole system fails. So it really comes down to the glass and the stability.
So Ed, a kind of a question for you. Where do you feel that customers feel the difference when it comes to the Silent Sentinel line? Would it be within ports, borders, airports? I said airports, airfields, or I mean, it's probably kind of all of the above, right? Is there any other kind of places that we see these fitting into?
No, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. It's all of the above. We're seeing customers, we're seeing requirements in long range surveillance along borders, on the water. We're also seeing transport. We've got oil and gas customers. It pretty much just runs the gamut, if you will, and anyone who is looking for long range surveillance, and then also the ability to add potentially those other payloads and those other integrations. So radar integration, we're seeing a lot with counter UAS, or drone detection, that sort of thing. So definitely all of the above, and we're actually seeing a lot more use cases come into play now.
So Rob, earlier you mentioned how many sensors can actually fit onto these cameras, particularly the Silent Sentinel, or excuse me, not the Silent Sentinel, particularly the Jaeger.
Yes.
And with that, there are different thermal choices, and those thermal choices can get really confusing. They're kind of confusing for me. So, because we have, was it LWIR and we have MWIR, we have cool versus uncooled. Could you help us and me kind of help us map which one applies and to when?
Yeah, fortunately, it's a little bit simpler than that. You have
Okay.
cooled mid-wave IR, and you have uncooled long-wave IR. So there's just really two choices, right? The uncooled LIR sensors, or the long wave, they're great for short to mid-term applications, say up to 15 kilometers in ideal conditions. We see they perform best in like low humidity environments. They're incredibly versatile. You can get them with
Okay.
fixed lenses up to 100 millimeters, or zoom lenses up to 300 millimeters. They have SD and HD resolutions. So if your mission is relatively closer in, this is typically a choice. Now, if your mission is really pushing beyond that 15-kilometer mark, and you're operating in high moisture areas like marine
Hmm.
ports, you really need that cooled MWIR sensor. It's a premium long distance performer, right? And the key difference between the two is this cooler, right? And it keeps these sensors at a very low temperature to radically increase their sensitivity. And so that's why they excel in these environments when, potentially you have high humidity, you're not getting as much heat coming through to the camera itself. So again, they handle big lenses, up to 1200 millimeters. And this is really your choice for medium to very long applications. So that's kind of the difference between the two, and why you may select one or the other.
Then
So at the
you also have to factor in the total cost of ownership as well. So, when
mm,
you look at a budget, when you look at what our customer may have for a budget, you have to factor in the fact that, one is going to be a cheaper option, the long wave.
mhm.
The MW is going to be mostly a more expensive initial cost, and then you have to factor in the maintenance. So those cool barometers, they have to have a maintenance plan and that needs to be factored into the cost as well. So
Uh-huh.
TCO for a long wave is going to be significantly less than a mid wave.
Right. And if you look at the lineup, all of the Aeron products have long wave uncooled sensors.
Okay.
When you move up to the Jaeger, you get the choice. The entry level product has the long wave uncooled, but the big boys that are really looking out for those big payloads, they're the ones that are going to have the cooled MWIR. So you get the
So
choice on Jaeger.
what does maintenance on both of these cameras, what does that look like? Could you give an example of what maintenance looks like on the Jaeger, what it looks like on Aeron?
The Aeron, I won't say it's maintenance free,
Okay.
but it is relatively easy on the maintenance. You'll put one up, you will let it ride. You may have to go out and clean the unit periodically. You may have to adjust the unit periodically, but the maintenance on the Aeron is relatively low. Where the maintenance comes in with the Jaeger is mostly around the bolometer, the cooling of the bolometer, the maintenance cycle on that, and just the typical camera maintenance that you would have on the Aeron as well.
So I want to get a little bit more specific, drill down just a tad bit. I did ask at the beginning when to choose which camera. Is there any is there any specifics that you could go into besides the distance as to when to choose Jaeger, when to choose Aeron?
Yeah, I think the big one that Ed mentioned is cost, right? In terms of initial cost of the two systems, they're very different. The Aerons are typically in the tens of thousands, whereas the Jaegers are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So as Ed was saying, if you're depending on what your budget is, you may have to use one or the other.
Okay.
So I've got a good little acronym for that. So TREB. So target, range, environment, and budget. So when you put those together, target, how many pixels do you want on target? Range, how far do you want to be able to see out? Environment. Are we looking at something that there's a lot of moisture in the air? And then obviously your budget. So the good thing about us is that the good thing about Silent Sentinel is that we have options. So there's a lot of different options there. There's a lot of different configurations. We have lower end Aerons and we have higher end Jaegers and pretty much everything in between. So there are a lot of options when it comes to budget.
So let's kind of translate that to outcomes a bit. What early warning distances should teams expect in real world terms?
Yeah, I think if you're looking at the Aeron line of cameras, and you're looking for human targets, realistically, your early warning range about 4.6 kilometers, almost 3 miles of lead time. For a car-sized vehicle on the Aeron, you pushing detection out to a remarkable 14 kilometers, or just under about 9 miles. So moving up to the Jaeger system is truly revolutionary. A lone human target, we've been able to give early warning out to 30 kilometers.
It's
So like
crazy.
19 miles of reaction time. For spotting a car-sized vehicle, it pushes that limit. We've been able to detect cars at 46 kilometers. That's almost 29 miles
Sheesh.
in terms of how far you can see in ideal conditions with some of these kind of cameras. Obviously, if you're in an environment where you have smoke or fog or other things in the air, that can get reduced a little bit as well. So.
And when you're talking about those sort of ranges, you have to factor in the curvature of the earth. So the camera has to be mounted in a certain position and
Mm.
high enough to be able to see over the curvature of the earth. So that's another factor. And what we do is, we work very consultatively with our customers, and we work with them to determine the best camera in the best environment, and then all of those little gotchas that are out there.
So let's pivot just a tad. So with absolute positioning, a moment ago you guys talked about just the positioning of these cameras and all things to consider. So with absolute positioning and radar slews, they get a lot of attention. What problems do they actually solve, say at 2 in the morning when things are dark?
So absolute positioning, it's going to give you the ability to find an object more precisely and universally because it's using GPS.
Okay.
And it just basically allows cameras to be a lot more precise and accurate than say relative positioning. I know, Rob, you can probably chime in on this as well because you guys are factoring that in when designing the products and building the products.
Yeah, absolutely. As we talked about earlier, you know, at these distances, the field of view of these cameras is so small that it's very difficult to get the camera on target. So typically with like a radar or some kind of other sensor that's
Hmm.
detecting something, you know, maybe a drone at a distance or other things, it can then send those coordinates to the camera, and that absolute positioning allows the camera to use that information to get on target at those very very small field of view. And so as you look at the specifications around the camera, those they're very tight around how accurately we can get on target for those kind of applications.
So building on that, because these things they have to integrate into something, right? And from what I'm aware of, Silent Sentinel has its own kind of operating system called NextOS. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's correct.
So what
Um,
exactly is NextOS?
yeah, so beyond the optics, beyond the positioning of Jaeger, I think the true secret weapon, the thing that makes it tick, is NextOS.
Okay.
It's a
So that's
groundbreaking
how we say
soft
it, next, not
NextOS.
NextOS.
That's what's on all our YouTube videos. We'll use that. Software-defined operating system that's just not like old school firmware. It really helps to deliver the performance, reliability, and flexibility like nothing we've ever seen before. It provides this one centralized web-based control platform
Hmm.
that essentially takes all of these connected sensors, all your cameras, all your payloads, and turns them into a sophisticated smart device. We're talking about applying very powerful AI processing right into the network in real time, putting a fully customized security ecosystem at your fingertips.
So how does NextOS, I have to practice saying that. How does NextOS different from other type of camera systems that are out there?
Yeah, it really allows you to do incredible things. And I think, in terms of allowing the camera to sense, observe, identify, track, and deter faster and more accurately than a rigid embedded operating system does. And how it does that is because it allows for this flexibility. It's software defined. So it's really kind of built up from the ground up for each kind of one of these unique systems that you put in place. It really gives you all of that flexibility to bring, not only the features you want today, but the features that you want tomorrow with simple software upgrades. It allows you to really kind of future proof your investment and create a fully modular and really infinitely customizable network of smart sensors.
So with NextOS, are there any features that are worth enabling by default that we should turn on, or what is that process like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the short answer is no. Now, out of the box, NextOS system is tuned for peak performance. You can run with the default settings and you can get really true performance at these incredible distances. But the longer answer is every single customer has a unique environment, right? And the default, it's going to work, but you're probably almost every single customer is going to make minor adjustments to, for their environment. For example, let's say you're dealing with a scene that has very low contrast. You're trying to track a white fox on snow, right? Or maybe you've got fog or heavy haze in the area. You might then want to, customers will then go out, they'll enable like contrast enhancement modes or anti-fog modes to pull the details out.
And following on from that as well, I think the beauty of it is, it was developed by Silent Sentinel. It's not something that was developed and something that we're trying to to fit into what we do. It is absolutely developed and built for the cameras that we have, and it was built off of customer input. So things that we were looking at in the market that that customers were asking for.
So it sounds as if NextOS is the secret sauce of Silent Sentinel. Yeah, the cameras are fantastic, but the secret sauce that makes them do what they do is NextOS. Would you agree with that, Terrence?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. At the end of the day, the customer wants to achieve something, right?
Yeah.
And you've got the basic tools in the platform and lenses and other things, but to really enable that deep level of integration into customer, C2 systems, or even if they're using a VMS or other things, it's the capability of NextOS that delivers that overall, video acquisition that customer demands in order to meet these different application needs.
So,
So
so, so I'm going to actually look at it in a food term. So I'm from the South, and if you want to make a good gumbo or if you want to make a good étouffée, you have to start with a good roux. So I think the base of the Silent Sentinel of the Magic is NextOS. And then you add all of the other ingredients to make a fantastic gumbo or étouffée. I think it all goes together, but I think that's the base to make the magic.
all right, so we're throwing food terms out there. Which one would be the Jaeger and which food would be the Aeron? This question is for you.
Oh, that's not a good one. It's, do you like étouffée more or do you like gumbo more? Uh, et, Etouffee is harder to make, so I'm gonna say that the Jaeger is the etouffee, and I'm gonna say the Aeron is the gumbo.
All right. This is a good way to remember them. Do you guys have any final thoughts for the listeners? Any final advice that you would want to give?
Yeah, I think this is a really exciting addition to the overall Motorola portfolio. It adds a whole new capability to what we can achieve in the market. And so I would just encourage anybody who's got a customer out there that has these kind of requirements, reach out to Ed and get yourself a system. Try it out. Have the customer try it out, and just experience what these things can bring to your applications.
And I would say these are extremely exciting times. The fact that we've got the Silent Sentinel line, the fact that Rob and the guys are constantly making improvements and making a better product, taking our customers' feedback and really doing some cool things out there. I'd say watch this space because what you have now is really good. What you're going to see in the future is going to be just unbelievable.
That is an absolutely perfect way to end it, Ed. So, with that being said, if you found this useful, please subscribe to the Pelco channel. Thank you for tuning in to the Pelco Brief.